course. VOA Weather Hits.
Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English. Coming up on the program, Katie Weaver reports on violence in Ecuador after the apparent escape of 2 gang leaders. I report on a new AI key on computer keyboards using Microsoft Windows. Brian Lynn has the technology report on this year's Consumer Electronics Show. Later, Andrew Smith and Joe Robbins present the lesson of the day. But first,
officials in Ecuador say men with face coverings broke into the set of a public television channel in Ecuador, waving guns and explosives during a live broadcast on Tuesday. That led the president to declare that the country had entered an internal armed conflict. The men were armed with guns and what looked like sticks of dynamite. They entered the set of the TC television network in Guayaquil during a nationwide news program. The men shouted that they had bombs. Noises similar to gunshots could be heard. No one died in the attack. Officials later said all the 13 intruders had been arrested and would face terrorism charges. Officials have not said who was behind the television station attack. They also have not said who was behind a series of other recent attacks. But the violent incidents followed the escapes from prison of 2 leaders of Ecuador's most powerful drug gangs. President Daniel Noboa on Monday declared a national state of emergency. The measure lets officials suspend people's rights and use the military in places like prisons. The government has not said how many attacks have taken place since Los Choneros gang leader Adolfo Macias was found missing from his low-security prison cell Sunday. He was supposed to be moved to a high-security facility that day. On Tuesday, Ecuadorian officials announced that another gang leader, Fabricio Colón Pico, of the Los Lobos group, had escaped from prison. Colón Pico was captured on Friday as part of a kidnapping investigation. He has also been accused of trying to murder one of the nation's lead prosecutors. Other attacks have included an explosion near the house of the president of the National Justice Court. On Monday night, 4 police officers were kidnapped. Will Freeman is a political expert at the Council on Foreign Relations. He said gangs in Ecuador have assassinated a presidential candidate and set off car bombs in front of government buildings in the past. But he said Tuesday's events marked a new peak in violence in the country. Ecuador sits between Peru and Colombia, the world's largest cocaine producers. In recent years, Ecuador has become a key passage point for cocaine. Much of the violence in the country comes as drug gangs fight each other and the government for control of ports and smuggling points. Freeman said that Ecuador's government will have to find ways to control prisons, where gang leaders continue to run their operations. it might have to consider extraditing some of the top criminal leaders to the United States. Ecuador, a nation of 20 million people, might also have to make judicial changes to give judges greater safety. If these guys can storm a TV station or kill a presidential candidate, you as a judge will not go up against them without promises of safety, Freeman said. Los Choneros is one of the gangs that officials consider responsible for the increase in violence. It reached a new level of violence last year with the assassination of presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio. Officials say the gang has links with Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. The whereabouts of Macias are unknown. Prosecutors opened an investigation and charged 2 guards in connection with his apparent escape. But neither the police, the prison system, nor the federal government confirmed whether the prisoner fled the facility or might be hiding in it. In February of 2013, he escaped from a high-security facility but was recaptured weeks later. I'm Katie Weaver.
Starting this month, some new personal computers that run Microsoft's Windows 11 operating system will have a special Copilot key. The key will launch the software company's AI chatbot. Getting computer makers like Dell to add an AI key is the latest move by Microsoft to make use of its close partnership with ChatGPT maker OpenAI. With the development, Microsoft is turning its software into an opening for generative AI technology. Most people now connect to the internet and many AI applications by phone rather than computer. But the announcement is the start of what is expected to be a competitive year for technology companies and AI. Many companies still have not answered all of AI's ethical and legal questions. The New York Times last month brought legal action against both OpenAI and Microsoft. The news organization argued that tools like ChatGPT and Copilot, formerly known as Bing Chat, are infringing on copyrighted news articles. The keyboard design will be Microsoft's biggest change to PC keyboards since it introduced a special Windows key in the 1990s. The newest AI key will have a Copilot logo and be placed near the spacebar. On some computers, it will replace the right control key, while on others it will replace a menu key. Microsoft is not the only company with special keys. Apple started the idea in the 1980s with its Command key. Google has a search button on its Chromebooks. Google was also the first to try an AI-specific key to launch its voice assistant on its now discontinued Pixelbook. But Microsoft has a much stronger hold on the personal computer market through its agreements with computer makers like Lenovo, Dell, and HP. About 82% of all desktop computers laptops and workstations run Windows. Just 9% use Apple's operating system, and just over 6% for Google's, says market research firm IDC. Last week, Dell Technologies was the first to announce a Copilot key on its newest XPS laptops. Microsoft has not yet said which other computer makers will use the Copilot key beyond Microsoft's own Surface devices. It said several companies are expected to show their new models at the CES show in Las Vegas.
One of the world's largest technology events, CES, is happening this week in Las Vegas, Nevada. The show is produced by the Consumer Technology Association, which is based in Arlington, Virginia. CES presents the latest technology offerings from companies across the world. Here is a look at some top products presented at CES 2024. Electronics manufacturers LG and Samsung brought televisions to CES that have a transparent screen design. The TVs use OLED technology. They are designed to be hidden in a room when not in use. David Park from LG's Home Entertainment Division described OLED to the Associated Press as a material that we can print on any type of surface. In this case, Park said OLED was printed onto a piece of glass. When not in the transparent setting, the TVs have a traditional black background. The companies presenting the TVs did not provide pricing information, but experts say the transparent models are likely to cost tens of thousands of dollars. South Korea's Samsung announced it was cooperating with automaker Hyundai to develop home-to-car and car-to-home services for all Hyundai and Kia vehicles. This artificial intelligence, AI-powered system will permit users of Samsung's SmartThings service to remotely set their vehicle's temperature or open its windows. And users can control lights and connect to devices inside the home when inside the car. South Korean electric automotive company HL Mando demonstrated a parking robot called Parky. It is designed to operate independently in parking structures. The robot can move underneath parked vehicles, lift the cars up and transport them to different spaces or return them to their drivers. Robotics developer Augmen presented a new machine designed to assist pets. The OR robot is equipped with a food container to feed animals. It can also play with pets, record health details, and capture images and videos of animals' daily activities. Sports equipment developer Lifespan introduced an exercise bicycle desk combination that uses human power to charge phones or other devices. The Ampera bike is designed to be used with a standing desk table. Lifespan says at a speed of 60 RPMs, the bike can produce up to 65 watts of electricity per hour. record player manufacturer Victrola presented a new turntable model that can send or stream music to a sound system or personal device. The Sapphire player targets music lovers who favor vinyl over digital sound. It sells for about $1,500 and will go on sale in the spring. South Korea's We Robotics introduced a wearable robot that provides walking assistance to users. The company's WIM model is designed for anyone who feels the need for an extra push when walking. An online description explains the robot can help individuals walk farther, faster, and healthier. The price for such assistance is high, though, with the WIM selling for about $2,500. French health product developer Barracoda presented what it described as the world's first AI-powered smart mirror for mental wellness. The company's BeMind model is built to work in any bathroom and does not need a device app to operate. The product was designed to use cameras and sensors to collect data on a person's movements, expressions, and language. Creators of the device claim it can identify a user's moods and sense other possible mental health issues. The electronic mirror can then suggest different treatments or activities to help the user, or even guide forms of meditation. The Cold Snap company introduced a machine that can make single servings of ice cream in about 2 minutes. The machine uses small containers called pods, just like Keurig coffee makers. The company points out the pods for its Cold Snap machine can be kept at room temperature, saving energy costs. The machines can be taken anywhere and are simple to operate. Chinese robotics developer Mammoth demonstrated a new version of its self-driving lawnmower. The latest all-wheel drive Luba 2 includes new wireless abilities and tools to deal with obstacles in the grass. The robot mower is already available and sells for just over $2,000. I'm Dan, thank you for having me.
In this week's report, you looked at some interesting products introduced at the yearly CES show. I know this long-running electronics show was really hurt by the pandemic and kind of struggled to recover from that, right?
Yes, that is correct. In 2021, the CES show was held only virtually with no events held in Las Vegas at all. The next year, CES officially returned to a physical conference, but only about 44,000 people attended compared to nearly 200,000 people in 2020. And last year saw the return of more than 100,000 attendees. But organizers and reporters covering this year's event say it should finally reach numbers closer to those pre-pandemic levels.
Like in past years, we heard about some unusual and interesting technology products set to hit the market. But of those covered, what do you think might be the most popular?
Yeah, it's always hard to predict which products will take off or just go away. A big product area at CES is always TVs, though, with manufacturers showing off their latest tech and gadgets. And this year, the transparent TVs have gotten a lot of attention, mainly because they're so unique, but they're very costly, and many people simply cannot afford them. I think two products that could really catch on are the pet-sitting robot, since the world is filled with pet owners who spend lots of money, and the streaming record player, which gives more options to true vinyl lovers.
Sounds cool. Thanks again for being here, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dan.
My name is Andrew Smith.
And I'm Jill Robbins.
You're listening to The Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. Today's lesson helps you do more with Level 2 of our video series, Let's Learn English. This series shows Anna Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C.
Today's lesson is about an important grammar topic, the passive voice. But it is also about a kind of American food called barbecue.
And barbecue can be an important topic for some Americans, as we will see in Lesson 8 of Level 2.
But first, here's a quick example and explanation of the passive voice. Listen to these two sentences.
My brother broke the glass. The glass was broken.
The first sentence tells us who did the action. My brother is the subject who did the action.
The object of the verb broke in the first sentence is the word glass. And in the second sentence, the glass was broken, we either don't know or don't want to say who did the action. We care more about the glass, so the word glass becomes the subject, and we use the verb be plus the past participle of the verb to show that something happened to the glass.
The passive voice is often used when we want to put extra attention or focus on products or things, such as food, rather than the people who make or produce the things.
Now, let's listen to part of Lesson 8. Anna does a news report on the subject of barbecue. Try to listen for sentences with the passive voice.
Today, a barbecue battle is being held in Washington, D.C. This festival, which is known as one of the biggest food festivals in the United States, brings together barbecue lovers from all over the country. Barbecue is meat that is cooked over an open fire or on a grill. Chicken, pork, and beef are all common meats to grill on a barbecue. No matter which meat you like to barbecue, the sauce is very important. Sauces are taken very seriously by chefs. Most ingredients are kept secret. So, can you tell us what is in your barbecue sauce?
No, I can't tell you.
So tell us, what is the secret ingredient in your barbecue sauce? Sauces are made by the barbecue chefs themselves. Most sauces are made with a tomato sauce, vinegar, and spices.
Did you hear the definition of barbecue there? It's
barbecue is meat that is cooked over an open fire or on a grill.
It doesn't matter who is doing the cooking, so the passive voice is used. You can also hear the passive voice in the last two sentences. The word sauces is more important than who makes them, so Anna uses the passive voice.
Sauces are made by the barbecue chefs themselves. Most sauces are made with a tomato sauce, vinegar, and spices.
Listen to Professor Bott give another example.
How many passive sentences did you find? Here is one I found.
Today, a barbecue battle is being held in Washington, D.C.
You're listening to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. We often use the passive when there are large numbers or statistics because there are so many subjects doing the action.
For example, we might say that millions of smartphones have been sold during the last 10 years. In this example, we don't know or care about the people who sold them. We want to bring the listener's attention more to the phones than the people who sell them or who buy them.
Now we're going to learn more about barbecue in the United States. Different regions or areas in the U.S. cook the barbecue and make the sauces in different ways. And there is some friendly competition between the regions about who has the best barbecue. That's why there is a festival called the Barbecue Battle. Let's listen.
There are some areas of the U.S. that are known for their tasty barbecue. The states of Texas, North and South Carolina, and the cities of Memphis and Kansas City are known as the Barbecue Belt. People who are loyal to barbecue are really loyal to their favorite barbecue. That is why this festival is called a battle. Let's ask a couple of people which barbecue is best.
Texas, of course. Carolina barbecue is the very best.
Kansas City, Memphis style.
Kansas City.
Texas.
Kansas.
Texas.
Kansas.
Texas.
Kansas.
This is Anna Mateo reporting.
Texas.
She keeps saying Texas, I said Kansas.
You can see that people disagree about where the best barbecue comes from. Jill, what about you? Do you have a favorite type of barbecue?
I like the sweet sauces like those from Texas. How about you, Andrew?
Well, because I grew up mostly in North Carolina, I have to say that I enjoy North Carolina barbecue the most. The sauce there is not really sweet, but instead it has some vinegar, which makes it have a special taste.
Just like everything from North Carolina. After going to the barbecue festival, Anna shows Kelly her report. Let's see what Kelly has to say about the subject.
Kelly, people feel so strongly about barbecue. Unbelievable. So, what do you think of my project?
This is what I think. There is no way that Texas has the best barbecue. I am from Kansas City, and we have the best barbecue in the whole country. My mother and father owned a barbecue restaurant, which was really famous. So I know barbecue. Anna, I know barbecue. I know barbecue. I know barbecue.
Oh my. Kelly knows a lot about barbecue, and you know more about passive sentences. Be sure you go to the website to learn even more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm hungry.
It seems that Kelly also had some strong feelings about barbecue. And now I think I'm getting hungry too.
Yeah, it's almost lunchtime. And as Professor Bott says, remember that you can learn more on our website at learningenglish.voanews.com. Each lesson of Let's Learn English has a lesson plan you can download for free. It explains more about the lesson and has helpful information for both students and teachers.
Remember that you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And thanks for listening. I'm Andrew Smith.
And I'm Jill Robbins.
Today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English. Coming up on the program, Ashley reports on the recent increase of COVID-19 deaths. Brian Lynn has a story on the state of emergency in Papua New Guinea. Dan Friedel reports on last year's record warmth. Jill Robbins and I preview this year's most important world elections, and John Russell presents the Everyday Grammar lesson. But first,
the World Health Organization, WHO, says holiday gatherings and the spread of a new COVID-19 variant led to increased hospitalizations and deaths last month. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said Wednesday that nearly 10,000 deaths were reported in December. He added that hospitalizations during the month jumped 42% in nearly 50 countries. Tedros said, although 10,000 deaths a month is far less than the peak of the pandemic, this level of preventable deaths is not acceptable. Tedros said it was certain that cases of COVID-19 were increasing in other places that have not been reporting case numbers. Tedros said the JN.1 variant is now the most common in the world. Since it is an Omicron variant, current vaccines should still provide some protection. Health officials in the U.S. say there is no evidence that JN.1 causes more severe disease than recent variants. In the United States, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, reports that there have been at least 110,000 hospitalizations and 6,500 deaths from the flu since October. The agency added that COVID-19 illnesses were not increasing as quickly as flu illnesses. Still, COVID-19 is putting more people in the hospital than the flu. Maria Van Kerkhove is the technical lead at WHO for COVID-19. She said there is an increase in respiratory diseases around the world due to COVID-19, flu, and pneumonia. We expect those trends to continue into January through the winter months in the Northern Hemisphere, Van Kerkhove said. She added there have also been increases in COVID-19 in the Southern Hemisphere, where it is now summer. WHO officials suggest that people get vaccinated, wear face coverings, and make sure air can move in and out of indoor areas. Michael Ryan is the head of emergencies at the WHO. He said, the vaccine may not stop you from being infected, but the vaccines are certainly reducing significantly your chances of being hospitalized or dying. I'm Ashley Thompson.
The government of Papua New Guinea declared a state of emergency on Thursday after at least 16 people were killed in rioting. After declaring the emergency, Prime Minister James Marape told a news conference that the government would take steps to prevent further lawlessness. Speaking directly to the people of the South Pacific country, Merapi said, "This is your country as much as it's my country. Breaking the law does not achieve certain outcomes." The unrest began Wednesday in the capital, Port Moresby, after hundreds of police officers, soldiers, and other government workers walked off their jobs. The workers had discovered an unexpected pay cut. Government officials later said the reduction was a mistake, calling it a glitch. They said it would be fixed. Australian state broadcaster ABC reported that at least 16 people were killed in the unrest. Rioting in Port Moresby killed 9 people, while 7 were reported dead in the northern city of Lae. Local video showed thousands of people in the streets of Port Moresby, Reuters news agency reported. Many carried what appeared to be looted goods as black smoke rose over the city. The French news agency AFP reported at least 25 people were treated with gunshot wounds at a hospital in the capital. In addition, at least 6 people were treated for knife injuries, AFP said. Merapi told reporters there was evidence that organized rioting had taken place. He promised the government would secure democracy and the rule of law. He said about 1,000 military troops were standing by to be deployed to areas experiencing further unrest. Reuters reported that violence had eased in the capital Thursday. Many stores, banks, and other businesses were closed as owners sought to repair property damage. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said his government was watching the situation, but had not received any requests for help. "We continue to urge calm at this difficult time," he told reporters. Australia has in the past supported policing efforts in Papua, and the two nations recently signed a security agreement. Papua New Guinea is home to 10 million people and about 800 languages. Farming is an important industry, but the country also holds rich resources, including gold and copper. Tensions in the country have been rising, along with unemployment and living costs. This has led to an increase in violent crime over the past year. Merapi has said improving the security situation will help bring in more foreign investment. I'm Brian Lynn.
Agency says 2023 broke records for global warmth. The average temperature for the year was 1.48 degrees Celsius above the world's pre-industrial temperature. World climate experts agree that an average increase up to 1.5 degrees or higher could lead to extreme climate disasters. They set the 1.5 degree Celsius mark at a 2015 climate conference in Paris. However, January 2024 is measuring so warm that it is likely to average at or beyond the 1.5 mark for the month, says Samantha Burgess. She is deputy director of Copernicus. Scientists have repeatedly said an average of 1.5 degrees of warming over as much as 30 years would violate the limit. The 1.5 degree goal has to be kept alive because lives are at risk and choices have to be made, Burgess said. The record heat made life difficult and sometimes deadly in Europe, North America, and China, among other places. Climate scientists say heat is not the only problem related to temperature rise. They say severe weather events, such as heavy rains that cause flooding, along with wildfires and extreme dry conditions, are connected to the rising temperatures. For the first time, nations meeting on climate late in 2023 agreed that the world needs to move away from polluting fossil fuels. Copernicus said the average temperature in 2023 was 1/6 of a degree Celsius above the past record, set in 2016. The average temperature was 14.98 degrees Celsius. It was record-breaking for 7 months. We had the warmest June, July, August, September, October, November, December, Burgess said. It wasn't just a season or a month that was exceptional. It was exceptional for over half the year. Malte Meinshausen is a climate scientist at the University of Melbourne in Australia. He says about 1.3 degrees Celsius of the warming comes from greenhouse gases, with another 0.1 degrees from usual weather conditions such as El Niño. Copernicus records only go back to 1940. Other organizations will announce climate reports for 2023 on Friday. The groups include the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the U.S. and Great Britain's Meteorological Office. While some national weather offices only have records going back to the 1940s, many scientists agree that this is the warmest period for Earth in over 100,000 years. Copernicus said there were 2 and nearly 3 days in 2023 where the world's average temperature was at least 2 degrees above that of the pre-industrial period. In addition, for more than half the year, the world average temperature was 1.5 degrees warmer than in the mid-1800s. I'm Dan Friedel.
Will go down as one of the most politically important years in history. More than 60 countries will hold national elections representing half of the world's population. Here is a look at 6 of the year's most important elections. The U.S. presidential election looks to be a rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. The two frontrunners have very different opinions on America's place in the world. The results in November's race may decide how tough the U.S. will be on China, Russia, and other international rivals. Joseph S. Nye Jr. is the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense. He told VOA that Trump's America First position is attempting to bring isolationism back in foreign policy. That could leave U.S. allies in a difficult position as tensions rise between Taiwan and China, and as the Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Hamas wars continue. On Russia, Nye said, Trump is likely to be more favorable to Putin. That means pressure to reduce support for Ukraine is very likely. As president, Biden has sent military aid packages to Ukraine and Israel, even as he faces opposition from both parties. Biden is currently behind Trump in the polls in a possible rematch.
Taiwan will hold its general elections on January 13th. Although small in size, Taiwan has a big influence over the world economy. More than 70% of the world's semiconductors and about 90% of all advanced microchips are made by Taiwanese companies. The question of Taiwan's independence from China is at the center of conflict between the United States and China going into 2024. President Tsai Ing-wen is term limited and will not be running in January. She has warned the public that China is spreading disinformation online to take votes away from the leading presidential candidate, Lai Ching-te. Lai is the current vice president. He has angered China over past comments related to Taiwan's sovereignty. Lai's main opponents are taking a softer approach to China. Some experts worry that tensions between China and Taiwan could worsen if Lai wins the presidency. Russia will hold its presidential election in March. Following its invasion of Ukraine nearly 2 years ago, Russia has become the most sanctioned country in the world. The sanctions have harmed its economy and driven Russia closer to China. Experts do not expect Russian President Vladimir Putin to lose in 2024. His top political rivals are jailed, exiled, missing, or dead. If Putin wins another 6 years, Russia will continue the same brutal agenda in Ukraine and increasingly autocratic policies at home, said Sergei Radchenko. He is a professor of Soviet history at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Experts say the level of success Putin sees in his war with Ukraine may depend on who wins the U.S. presidential election.
The European Union is headed for elections in June. Anti-immigration leaders with soft positions on Russia and China are set to push the European Parliament to the right. The Parliament, though, plays only a supervisory role in the EU. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has yet to announce whether she is running for re-election. She has shown strong support to Ukraine and has pressed President Xi Jinping to address China's large trade imbalance with Europe. If re-elected, von der Leyen would serve as an equalizing force in an increasingly populist European Union. She would work to balance the often conflicting interests of different member nations with her goal of containing Russia. The election results will decide how much pushback von der Leyen's pro-Ukraine agenda will face from incoming right-wing European lawmakers. That is especially important as Ukraine gets closer to becoming an EU member nation. India holds its general elections this spring. Critics of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his ruling BJP party say the country's religious minorities are facing widespread persecution or unfair treatment. Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda has gained popularity. Violence against Sikh and Muslim Indians has become increasingly common. Modi's government stands accused of killing a Sikh expatriate in Canada last summer and a failed plot to kill a Sikh activist living in New York City in November. Those incidents have affected India's diplomatic ties with the West. Modi has a very high approval rating among Indian voters and appears likely to earn a third 5-year term. If he wins, Modi is expected to build on the relationships he has made with both Trump and Biden during his time as Prime Minister.
South Africa's ruling party is at its weakest point since it came to power in 1994. The African National Congress, or ANC, is at risk of losing its majority in the legislature. To stay in power, the ANC will likely be forced to form a coalition with other parties. South Africa is the most industrialized nation in Africa, but with a 1/3 unemployment rate and power shortages across the nation, some young South Africans are turning away from the ANC. Still, it is likely that the ANC will stay in charge for the next 5 years, said Daniel Silk. He is a South African political expert. The Democratic Alliance, or DA, is the largest opposition party. If the DA wins an unlikely victory, there would be improvement in relations between South Africa and the West, Silk said. Silk said the ANC remaining in power could make way for an even stronger connection between South Africa and China. I'm Jill Robbins.
And I'm Dan Novak.
Consider a time when you heard or read news about business, investments, or politics. Now consider a happy time when you gathered with friends or family. You ate food, had something to drink, and perhaps smiled and laughed. What word might appear often in discussions about our two situations, the news and the family meal? The answer is one word that comes in a verb or noun form: share. Share will be the subject of today's everyday grammar. You will learn about the word's meanings, as well as commonly used structures in everyday situations. Let's start with some definitions. As we said before, the word share has both a noun and verb form. We can compare it to a superhero. Consider Peter Parker. He is a normal young man. But sometimes he becomes Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is all about action. Just as Peter Parker has a normal side and an active side, the word share has a noun form and an active verb form. Let's start with the noun form. When you read business or even political news, you are highly likely to see the noun form. Share suggests the idea of division or splitting something. So, a share can involve value, interest, or ownership that has been divided into parts. For example, a person might buy stock shares in a company. This means that a person is buying partial ownership of a business. Anytime you read news about the stock market, for example, the value of the shares of businesses is a central point of interest. Now consider a story about a political dispute. A scandal might happen, and one politician might be forced to accept his or her share of the blame for something that went wrong. In this usage, the politician is getting an amount of something, blame, that he or she deserves or is responsible for. You might use the noun form of share
when you talk about gatherings with family and friends. For example, friends might get together and decide to pay their share of the bill for a meal at a restaurant. In this case, the friends might divide the bill and pay what they owe individually. What about the verb form of share, you might ask? We often use it to talk about politics. Political parties might share power in a country, for example. We also might use the verb share to describe social gatherings. Family or friends might share food. In this case, the family or friends are coming together and dividing or splitting food among themselves. Everyone gets to eat and drink. Now we can ask the question, what are the most commonly used structures with both the noun and verb forms of share? The most common words that come before share are to and a. That is what Google's Ngram Viewer tells us. It is a database that contains information from thousands of books. But Ngram Viewer also gives us an important finding. To share is far more common than a share. So, we are very likely to read a sentence like this. The two sides agreed to share power. Or, the children decided to share the toys. We are somewhat less likely to read a sentence like this. He bought a share of Microsoft stock. What words are likely to come after share? The two most common structures, Google's Ngram Viewer tells us, are share of and share the. So think back to our earlier examples. He bought a share of Microsoft stock. The children decided to share the toys. Let's end this lesson with a quiz. Fill in the blank with the correct word or words. The countries agreed, blank, the profits made from the shipping canal. Here is one possible answer. The countries agreed to share the profits made from the shipping canal. I'm John Russell.
You just heard this week's Everyday Grammar. John Russell joins us now to talk a little bit more about the lesson. Welcome back, John.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Your lesson today explored the verb and noun form of share. Was there something you left out of the lesson?
Yes, there were several items I had to leave out. One point in particular comes to mind regarding how we use share to talk about social gatherings.
And what is that point?
One example used the noun form share to talk about friends going out and paying for their share of a meal. Another example used the verb form of share, as in a family gathered to share food and drinks.
Both examples involve the idea of splitting or dividing.
That's right, but there is an important difference. In the example where friends pay for their share of a meal, we have a kind of financial exchange. But in the example of the family who share food and drinks, we do not know if there was a financial exchange. There probably wasn't any kind of financial exchange.
I see. So we should assume that the verb share means dividing or splitting something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a financial exchange.
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks for explaining that a little bit more to us, John. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.
And that's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
program from the Voice of America. I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Katie Weaver. This program is aimed at English learners. So we speak slowly, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English. On the show today, Gina Bennett brings us Ask a Teacher. We also hear from Jill Robbins and Dan Friedel. And we close the show with An American Story. But first...
The first person who saw it was working overnight. The worker, a shovel operator, saw something white as he placed a large amount of dirt into the back of a truck. The driver of the truck put the dirt in the road. Another worker operating a bulldozer was ready to flatten it. But the worker stopped for a closer look when he too saw a piece of white. Only then did the mining workers realize they had found something special, a 2-meter-long mammoth tusk that had been buried for thousands of years. A mammoth is a kind of animal that lived in ancient times and had very long tusks. The animal went extinct or disappeared about 10,000 years ago in what is now the American state of North Dakota. The miners unearthed the tusk at the Freedom Mine near Beulah, North Dakota. The mine produces up to 14.5 metric tons of coal each year. We were very fortunate, lucky to find what we found, said David Straley. He is an executive of North American Coal, which owns the mine. After finding the tusk, the workers stopped digging in the area and called in experts. The experts estimated the tusk to be anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 years old. Jeff Person is a paleontologist with the North Dakota Geologic Survey. A paleontologist is an expert on ancient remains. Person was one of the experts that examined the tusk. He said it was miraculous that the tusk had not been more damaged, considering the large equipment that miners use at the site. Another dig at the discovery site found more bones. Experts found more than 20 bones. It is likely the most complete mammoth found in North Dakota, where it is more common to find one mammoth bone, tooth, or piece of a tusk. Person said it is not a lot of bones compared to how many make up the animal's skeleton. But he said it's a lot more than we've ever found of one animal together. Mammoths once were found across parts of Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. Paul Ullman, a University of North Dakota paleontologist, said mammoth remains have been found throughout the United States and Canada. The discovery at the mine is somewhat rare in North Dakota and in the area. Many remains of the animals alive during the last ice age were destroyed by movements of ice sheets, Ullman said. Other areas have produced more mammoth remains, such as in Texas and South Dakota. People have even found frozen mammoth bodies in Canada and Russia, Ullman added. The tusk weighs more than 22.6 kilograms and can break easily. Experts covered the tusk in plastic in order to control how fast the tusk loses water. If it loses water too quickly, the bone could break apart, Person said. The experts covered the other bones in plastic and stored them. The bones will remain in plastic for at least several months until the scientists can get the water out safely. The paleontologists will identify what kind of mammoth the tusk came from later, Person said. The mining company plans to donate the bones to the state for educational purposes. Our goal is to give it to the kids, Straley said. I'm Gregory Stockel.
Last summer on the Hawaiian island of Kauai, Tina Taniguchi was working close to the ground. Her coconut leaf hat covered most of her thick brown hair. Wet soil had gotten on her clothes and her smiling face. Taniguchi smiles a lot while working on the Hanapepe salt patch on the west side of Kauai. It is a piece of land about half a hectare in size, with pools of salty water. The salt becomes crystals as the water dries. It's hard work, but for me it's also play, Taniguchi said with a laugh. Taniguchi's family is one of 22 families who make pakai, the Hawaiian word for salt, following a cultural and spiritual tradition. Hanapepe is one of the last remaining salt patches in Hawaii. Its holy salt can be traded or given away, but must never be sold. Hawaiians use it in cooking, healing, rituals, and as protection. Taniguchi drives a car for about an hour to get to the salt patch. For her, it is like religion and play at the same time. It is the time when she makes a spiritual connection to the land. This would be a religious practice of mine for sure, Taniguchi said. My dad raised us saying that these mountains are his church, and the ocean is where you get cleansed.
Malia Nobrega Oliveira is another salt maker. She is also an educator and activist who leads efforts to preserve this old tradition. Her grandfather helped form the group of salt-making families called We Hana Pakai. The organization's goal, she said, is to communicate with the landowner, the state of Hawaii, whenever problems arise. Nobrega Oliveira said the salt patch is part of the lands taken away from Native Hawaiians after the U.S.-supported overthrow of Hawaii's monarchy in 1893. Regardless of what a piece of paper might say, we are stewards of the area, she said. Over the past 10 years, there have been several threats to this field. They include development, pollution from a neighboring airfield, damage to the sand from vehicle traffic, and waste left by visitors to the nearby beach. In addition, rising sea levels and weather might stop the practice. Nobrega Oliveira believes Western science and native knowledge can combine to combat the effects of climate change and save the salt patch. The steps she takes include building up the well's edges so water won't cover the salt beds. Another step is to prevent damage to the beach from vehicle traffic. Some ask us why we can't move this practice to a different location, she said. That's impossible because our cultural practice is particular to this land. There are elements here that make this place special for making this type of salt. You cannot find that anywhere else.
The process of turning seawater into salt can be slow. The season begins once the rain stops, and water starts to disappear from the salt beds. Ocean water travels underground and enters the wells. Each family has their own well. As water enters the well, so do tiny red brine shrimp. These small ocean animals give Hanapepe salt its unusual sweet taste, said Nobrega Oliveira. The families first clean the salt beds and line them with black clay. Then they move water from the wells into the beds. There, salt crystals form. The top level or layer is the whitest. It is used for table salt. The middle layer is pinkish and is used in cooking, while the bottom layer, which is a deep red color, is used in blessings and rituals. Fires on the island of Maui in August claimed 100 lives. After the fires, salt makers began sending their salt to survivors, so they can make their food delicious and bring some of that joy into their lives, Nobrega Oliveira said.
Interest in Hawaiian culture and language has recently grown on the islands, Nobrega Oliveira said. She now thinks about how to teach her knowledge to younger generations. One way she honors the Hanapepe salt patch is by writing Hawaiian songs and chants. She recently taught some school children one of those chants using the words Aloha Aina, which means love of the land. Aloha Aina captures our philosophy. The reason we do this, Nobrega Oliveira said. You take care of the land, and the land takes care of you. I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Jill Robbins.
Hello. This week on Ask a Teacher, we answer a question from an English learner named Sidra. Sidra asks, I want to know the difference between adverbs of frequency and degree and between participles and gerunds. Thank you for writing, Sidra. First, let's answer your question about adverbs. Different adverbs show different kinds of information. Adverbs of time tell us 4 things: when, how long, how often, and relationship in time. When something takes place. For example, I finished the project yesterday. How long something lasts, or duration. The class seemed to last forever. Frequency, or how often something happens. Sometimes I skip breakfast. And the relationship of 2 things in time. He still has my laptop. Adverbs of degree answer the questions how much, many, or to what extent. For example, she's staying with us for a bit. We're fairly certain it's a good idea. Degree adverbs can also demonstrate intensity. Some show high intensity. These kinds of adverbs are known as amplifiers. The food was completely gone. Others show low intensity, called diminishers. I'm almost finished with the book. So, adverbs of frequency tell how often, and adverbs of degree tell how much or to what extent. Now for the second question, the difference between participles and gerunds. We know that verbs can end in ing. Participles and gerunds are also words that end in ing. Let's look at the differences. When a verb ends in ing, it is the progressive or continuous aspect. That means the event is incomplete or temporary. We are listening to the podcast. She was studying at the library. Gerunds also have an ing ending, but they do not act like verbs. A gerund is a noun. This means it can be the subject or object of a sentence. For example, listening to music is my favorite hobby. She loves running. Participles have an ing ending too. They also do not act as verbs. A participle is an adjective. We usually use a participle when we are describing an experience that makes us feel certain emotions. For example, her answer was surprising. In this sentence, the participle surprising describes how you feel about her answer. Some other words that are often used as participles are amazing, boring, calming, exciting, and worrying. Please let us know if this explanation has helped you, Sidra. Do you have a question about American English? Send us an email at learningenglish@voanews.com. And that's Ask a Teacher. I'm Gina Bennett. Now, an American story. How the animals lost their tails and got them back, traveling from Philadelphia to Medicine Hat. It appeared in the book Rutabaga Stories by Carl Sandburg, published in 1922. Sandburg was a very famous American poet. He wrote Rutabaga Stories for his 3 daughters, Margaret, Janet, and Helga. The stories make liberal use of repetition and nonsense language, a fun form of wordplay. Listen closely to the language of this story about talking animals with a big problem.
Far up in North America, near the Saskatchewan River in Winnipeg Wheat Country, not far from the town of Moose Jaw, where nobody works unless they have to, and they nearly all have to, there is a place known as Medicine Hat. There, on top of a high tower, in a high chair, sits the head spotter of the weather makers. When the animals lost their tails, it was because the head spotter got careless. You see, the tails of the animals were hard and dry because of a stretch of hot, dusty weather. Then, at last, came a rain. It poured down on the animals' tails and softened them. But then a cold wind came and froze all the tails solid. A big wind followed, and blew and blew and blew, until all the animals' tails flew off their bodies. It was easy for the hogs with their short tails, but it was not so easy for the blue fox, who uses his tail to run and to write secret letters in the snow. It was easy for the rabbit and her little white tail, but it was hard for the yellow flongboo, who lights up her home in the hollow tree with her bright tail. The animals decided to choose a committee of representatives to represent them in parley-hoo, to see what steps could be taken by talking to do something. There were 66 representatives on the committee. They decided to call it the Committee of 66. For a chairperson, they picked the top Flongbu. When there was a fight among the Flongbu families, she was the one who would say who was right and who was wrong. She was from Chappaquiddick, and lived there in a horse chestnut tree between South Hadley and Northampton. After her nomination and election, she brought the Committee of 66 to order. "It is no picnic to lose your tail, and we are here for business," she said, banging the gavel. Then a blue fox from Waco, Texas, stood up and said, "Madam Chairwoman, do I have the floor?" That is a way of saying, "May I speak?" "I make a motion," said the blue fox. "I move that this committee get on a train at Philadelphia and ride on the train until it stops, and then take another train until we get to Medicine Hat, where the head spotter of the weather-makers sits. There we will ask if he will bring back our tails." The chairwoman said, "All in favor of the motion will clean their right ears with their right paws." And all the blue foxes and yellow Flongbus began cleaning their right ears with their right paws. "All who oppose the motion will clean their left ears with their left paws," said the chairwoman. And all the blue foxes and yellow Flongbus began cleaning their left ears with their left paws. The motion is carried both ways. "It's a razzmatazz," said the chairwoman. Once again, all in favor of the motion will stand up on their toes. And all the blue foxes and all the yellow Flongbus stood up. "And now," said the chairwoman, "all who are against the motion will stand on the top of their heads, stick their hind legs up in the air, and make a noise like woof woof." No one opposed the motion. "The motion is carried," said the chairwoman. So the committee went to Philadelphia to get the train to Medicine Hat. The chairwoman asked a policeman there, "Would you be so kind as to tell us the way to the Union Depot?" "It pays to be polite," said the policeman. "May I ask you again if you would kindly direct us to the Union Depot where the train is?" asked the Flongbu again. "Polite persons and angry persons are different kinds," said the policeman. The Flongbu's eyes changed their light, and a slow fire burned from where her tail used to be. She said, "Sir, I must inform you that we are the Committee of 66. We are distinguished representatives from places you do not know. This committee is going to ride to Medicine Hat with a special message and a secret errand for the head spotter of the weather-makers." "I am a polite friend of all respectable people," said the policeman, touching the star on his chest. "This is the first time ever in the history of the United States that a committee of 66 has ever visited a city in the United States, said the Flongbu. I beg to be mistaken, finished the policeman. The Union Depot is under that clock, and he pointed to a big clock nearby. Over to Union Depot train station they went, all 66, half foxes, half Flongbus. They are speaking in some strange language from where they come from, said one passenger. They have secrets to keep among each other and never tell us, said another passenger. We will find out all about it in the newspapers tomorrow, said a third passenger. Then the foxes and Flongbus climbed into a special car. The train left the station. It came to the horseshoe curve near Altoona, where the tracks bend in a half circle. Then it went on toward Ohio. Two baby blue foxes, the youngest on the committee, sat at the front of the car. Crossing Ohio and Indiana at night, the Flongbus took off the top of the car. The conductor told them, I must have an explanation. It is between us and the stars, they told him. The train ran on to Chicago. There were pictures in the newspapers that afternoon showing foxes and Flongbus eating pink ice cream with iron axes. Each blue fox and yellow Flongbu got their own newspaper. Crossing to the north, the sky began to fill with the snow ghosts of Minnesota. Again, the foxes and Flongbus lifted the top off the car so they would not miss the show. Some went to sleep, but the two baby blue foxes stayed up, watching the snow ghosts and telling snow ghost stories to each other. Early in the night, the first baby blue fox said to the second, "Who are the snow ghosts the ghosts of?" The second baby blue fox answered, "Snowmen, snow foxes, and snow fishes. Everybody has a snow ghost." And that was only the beginning of their talk. They would talk until morning about where the snow ghosts go on Christmas morning and how the snow ghosts watch the new year. Somewhere between Winnipeg and Moose Jaw, they stopped the train and all ran out in the snow. The white moon was shining down a valley of birch trees. At last they came to Medicine Hat, near the Saskatchewan River in Winnipeg wheat country, not far from the town of Moose Jaw, where nobody works unless they have to, and they nearly all have to. There they ran to the place where the head spotter of the weather-makers sits, in a high chair on a high tower, watching the weather. "Let loose another big wind to blow back our tails. Let loose a big freeze to freeze our tails back on, and let us get back our lost tails," they said to the head spotter. Which was just what he did, giving them exactly what they wanted. So they all went back home, satisfied.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but join us again tomorrow for another VOA Learning English program. Thanks for listening. I'm Katie Weaver.
And I'm Dan Friedel. a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Katie Weaver. This program is aimed at English learners. So we speak slowly, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today on the podcast, the Higher Education Report takes us to the well-educated state of Minnesota. Then Andrew Smith joins us to discuss an English phrase about the slow process of learning something new. We close with our newest America's Presidents episode about Joe Biden. But first,
a Chinese car group says China likely overtook Japan as the world's biggest auto exporter in 2023. The Chinese Passenger Car Association, or CPCA, says automakers like BYD Auto, Chery, and others are seeing increased sales overseas. The CPCA announced that exports of Chinese cars jumped 62% to a record 3.83 million vehicles. Japanese customs data showed car exports at 3.5 million for the first 11 months of the year, not including used vehicles. China's total auto exports were estimated to hit 5.26 million units last year. Japan's full-year exports were predicted at 4.3 million units, the CPCA found. China's rise as a top auto exporter is due in part to the strength of its electric vehicle, or EV, automakers. BYD overtook Tesla as the world's top seller of EVs late last year. Most of the sales were within China, however. Some governments are concerned about Chinese auto exports affecting sales of their own automakers. In September, the European Commission started an investigation into Chinese-made electric vehicles over subsidies they may have received. And the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden is considering raising taxes on some Chinese goods, including EVs, the Wall Street Journal reported last month. China is the world's largest auto market. Vehicle sales there rose 5.3% last year. Sales of battery-powered vehicles in China last year increased 20.8%. And sales of hybrids grew 82.5% last year. Sales of Chinese-made cars are expected to make up 63% of total sales in China this year. Sales of Chinese cars jumped 15.7% last year. French auto brands suffered in China in 2023, with sales down 41%. Sales of Japanese cars dropped almost 11% last year, while U.S. brands saw sales drop 1.4%. I'm Gregory Stockel.
Minnesota has the second highest education level in the U.S., as measured by the scholarship research website Scholaroo.com. A representative from Scholaroo told VOA Learning English that the state has a high percentage of residents with advanced degrees. It is ranked above Connecticut and just behind Massachusetts overall. The state is number 1 in the percentage of residents with doctoral degrees, Scholaroo says. The top study programs there are in education, medicine, and law. VOA Learning English talked with students and college supporters to learn why they think Minnesota is a good place for higher education. Akil Kolengode is an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota, Rochester. He is in a new program that offers an undergraduate degree in 2.5 years, compared to the traditional 4. His study program is in health sciences. It is called Next Gen Med, which deals with medical administration. He hopes to move from studying to working at the nearby Mayo Clinic, a well-known hospital based in Rochester. It is a big reason why I chose to stay in Minnesota, he said. Kolengode is in his second year of college. He said he and his classmates saw how the COVID-19 pandemic took away some of the in-person college experience from their older friends. He said, "We felt a little more motivation because we understood how much it could be taken for granted." He also saw the example of his parents working in the medical field and wanted to follow their path. Kolengode said many young people in Minnesota think they can only reach their goals by moving away.
These younger students are always told, oh, everything is so good when you leave home and when you can finally live on your own. But you can do all of those things when you're still in your hometown, saving money, getting the same education, and sometimes maybe better education if you're in your hometown.
Lori Carell is the chancellor, a top official at the University of Minnesota, Rochester. She said a number of universities in the U.S. are part of a new program testing College in 3. It aims to get students a degree in 3, not 4 years. She said many students in the U.S. are questioning the value of college because of the cost. They also are concerned about finding a good job when they finish. Schools like hers are working to help students complete their degrees with a good job and not a lot of debt. Students stay in school all year and work at the Mayo Clinic, which is close by, Carell explained. She said, "We need people to come to Minnesota."
There are a lot of needs for people with advanced degrees in Minnesota, making this 3-year undergrad option even more attractive.
Once people finish their undergraduate degree, she said, they can move on to advanced degrees and find a good job in Minnesota. Students from other states like Minnesota, too. Sia Sacardande came from Texas to study psychology at the University of Minnesota's main campus in Minneapolis and St. Paul, known as the Twin Cities. She said she considered schools in California, Michigan, and the rest of the U.S., but the combination of a strong educational program and a good financial aid offer brought her to Minnesota. She said she and her classmates consider undergraduate degrees just the start.
I plan to go to law school. I have friends who want to go to medical school at the university. I have friends who want to get their master's and their graduate degrees at the university. So I think the university definitely encourages that and uses whatever resources they can to help us plan a future and a career beyond just going to school there.
But she also said the school wants students who come from families that might not be considering college. Sacardande noted the university's scholarship for Native American students called the Native American Promise Tuition Program. It started last year. The university says it pays for 100% of school fees for students from recognized Native American tribes in Minnesota. In addition, Sacardande helped with a recent campaign by a state lawmaker to push the state to pay low-income students costs for attending a Minnesota public college. She said, The North Star Promise Scholarship Program will make sure all students in Minnesota think about college. The state senator who worked on the project was Omar Fateh, whose district is in Minneapolis. He said he is not surprised Minnesota ranks high in education. Minnesotans have long seen the value of higher education as a path to economic mobility, he said. Fateh said it is important to make higher education possible for all students in the state. He said the scholarship he is supporting can be used at both 2-year and 4-year colleges. Fateh's parents were immigrants from Somalia. His father came to the U.S. to study at Montana State University. He grew up in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia, but he was not a good student in high school. He said he was saved by a school program.
A program called the Pathways Program, which recruited students that were deemed to be quote-unquote at-risk youth into Northern Virginia Community College. That's why I'm a big supporter of community colleges, because I believe it really helped me and saved me.
Carell said Minnesota clearly values higher education. There's a great appreciation for advanced degrees and higher education in the state of Minnesota. She added that education leaders there feel a responsibility to give students a good ROI, or return on investment, for their time in school. Sakardande thinks students from inside and outside of the U.S. should consider Minnesota schools.
It's just a little bit less recognized in states like California and the Ivy Leagues, but I think once you get to Minnesota, you understand that there are great things to do here.
I'm Dan Friedel.
And now, words and their stories from VOA Learning English. On this program, we explore words and expressions in the English language. We give definitions, examples, notes on usage, and sometimes we use them in short conversations. Today, we talk about the process of learning to do something. For example, if you want to play a musical instrument, you need to learn how. You must take small steps. You learn how to hold or sit at the instrument. You learn how to read notes and how to play basic chords. Then you progress to short, easy songs. In other words, you need to take baby steps. Babies can look funny when they are learning to walk. Their steps are unsure. Their knees do not quite bend fully. They do not walk straight and often fall down. The more they walk, the steadier they get on their feet. Soon, their unsteady baby steps lead to a smoother, often speedy gait. We often use the term to describe how to reach a complex goal. Small baby steps can lead to the bigger goal. We will often use the term to suggest that someone slow down and be patient. A similar English expression goes, "You have to walk before you can run." Let's listen as two friends use these idioms.
Hey, how are your piano lessons going?
Slowly. I want to play a real song, but my teacher has me working on these same set of chords over and over again. They are difficult and boring at the same time.
I've been playing piano for years, and chords are important. They are the foundations of music. You need to know how to walk before you can run.
I know, but I also must be able to play a song by next month.
Why are you in such a hurry? Learning music requires patience. Take baby steps.
Please, no more advice. I told a friend I could play the piano, and now she wants me to play at her children's birthday party.
Oh, in that case, I have other advice for you.
What's that?
You reap what you sow.
Thanks a lot. Hey, what are you doing next month?
Learning a language is a lifelong process. To keep yourself from burning out, take baby steps. Learn a little every day, and soon your English will be fabulous. And that's all the time we have for this Words and Their Stories. I'm Andrew Smith.
I'm Dan Friedel, and you're listening to the Learning English podcast. We just heard Andrew Smith talk about the process of learning to do something new. Andrew, can you remind our listeners about the phrase you used?
Sure, Dan. This week I talked about the expression, you have to walk before you can run.
Andrew, where do you think this expression comes from?
Well, Dan, we have all seen a baby take his or her first unsure steps. They're always a bit unsteady, or maybe they have to hold on to someone's hand to stay balanced. You do not usually see a baby start running right away.
That's true, Andrew. Everybody probably had to learn to walk before they could run, except for perhaps the Olympic runner Usain Bolt.
I think we will probably have to check with his mother about that. But my guess is he still had to walk before he could run.
So, Andrew, let's talk about some things we enjoy doing today that took us a while to learn. You mentioned how it takes some people a long time to learn to play a musical instrument, but what is something where you had to walk before you could run in your life?
Well, I think a good example is learning to play the sport of tennis. I started pretty young, and at the beginning, you're just trying to make contact with the ball. And there's a lot to learn about the sport. And so you have to learn it step by step. So I definitely had to walk before I could run playing tennis. But once I could run, boy, it was fun.
Andrew, that's a good example. And I know making a really good shot in tennis is rewarding for all that hard work.
It is. And Dan, what about you?
Well, for me, the thing I like to talk about is learning how to row. In the late summer of 2019, when I was living in Washington, D.C., I took rowing classes with a local rowing team. Now, this is the kind of rowing that people do in the Olympics. Some people call it crew.
That's known to be a hard sport. Is that true?
Well, yes and no. The sport takes a fair amount of physical fitness, which is why in the movies you see people who are on the crew team exercising a lot. But when you're an adult, you don't have to be in such great shape. But the hard part, really, of rowing is the learning the technique. And that requires a lot of patience. The coaches start you off in a very flat, stable boat. It's just about impossible for the boat to tip over. But the problem is you cannot move very fast. So I have to admit, I wanted to run before I could walk. After 3 or 4 practices in the flat boats, they finally put all of us in boats that were still very safe, but we finally felt like we were moving through the water.
I bet that felt good.
You're right, Andrew, it did, but it still took me 3 or 4 more years before I was finally able to feel like I knew what I was doing and could actually go fast-ish. I'm still a pretty slow rower, even though my teammates and I are trying very hard to make the boat move fast.
Well, I'm sure it feels good to have made the progress you have made. And that reminds me of what I mentioned in this week's story. Learning a language is a lifelong process, and it requires baby steps. You cannot reach fluency right away, whether it is in speaking a language or in rowing a boat. And at the beginning, you do feel like you're learning a lot, but then you might come to a point where you feel like you still have to just go step by step.
Andrew, you're right about that. I think that the similarity between something like rowing and learning a language is that once you get to the point where you feel confident, like you feel confident talking to strangers, or you feel confident being in the boat and maybe not having a coach watch you all the time, I think that's the point where you start to gain a little bit of knowledge. Like I felt that when I was rowing, I learned a lot at the beginning, but I couldn't really put it into practice. The coaches gave me a lot of instruction, but like I was just trying to keep myself from falling in the water some of the time. And after 4 years of practice, I have more confidence. So I'm improving a little bit all of the time.
Well, and that's just like learning a language. We do continue to learn all the time. Sometimes it takes a while.
Well, Andrew, thanks for joining us. That was a fun chat, and thanks for helping us understand this English phrase.
Thanks, Dan.
VOA Learning English presents America's Presidents. Today we are talking about Joe Biden. He took office in 2021. Becoming America's 46th president. A member of the Democratic Party, Biden had been in national politics for a long time before he got to the White House. He served 36 years in the United States Senate, representing Delaware. After that, he held 2 terms as the nation's vice president, serving under President Barack Obama. Because Biden's presidency is so recent, this report will not discuss his time in office. Instead, it will discuss his earlier life. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was born in 1942 in Scranton, Pennsylvania. His family moved to Delaware when he was 10 years old. The Bidens were Roman Catholics of Irish ancestry. Joe was educated in private Roman Catholic schools as a youth. Later, he attended the University of Delaware. He received a degree in political science and history in 1965. He also fell in love at Delaware with fellow student Nelia Hunter. The two married the following year. Over the next few years, the couple had 3 children. Joe Biden also received his law degree from Syracuse University College of Law in New York. In 1972, at age 29, Joe Biden was elected to the U.S. Senate, representing Delaware. A few weeks later, Biden faced tragedy. Nelia and their children were in a car accident. She and daughter Naomi were killed in the crash. Sons Bo and Hunter were injured. Biden was suddenly a single father. He briefly considered leaving his Senate seat, but he decided to stay in office. Unlike most lawmakers, however, he did not move to Washington. He did not want to uproot his little boys. Instead, he traveled daily to and from Washington, D.C. on the train, so he could be home with his sons every night. The senator continued this custom for 36 years. Also during that time, Biden met Jill Jacobs, an English teacher. They fell in love and married in 1977. Daughter Ashley was born in 1981. Biden was a candidate for president in 1987 and 2007. After Barack Obama was nominated as the Democratic Party's 2008 presidential candidate, he asked Biden to join the campaign as his running mate. They won election, and Biden began serving as vice president. 4 years later, Obama and Biden were re-elected for a second term. Most political experts say Biden was an especially powerful vice president. He and Obama worked closely together, and Biden was influential in policy decisions. The president sought Biden's help in establishing a national economic stimulus program, for example. Biden also traveled the world as vice president and led diplomatic missions in troubled regions. He is widely considered one of the most successful vice presidents in American history. During his second term as vice president, Joe Biden faced another family tragedy. His adult son, Beau, died of brain cancer in 2015. Joe Biden had considered running for president in 2016, but after Beau died, the vice president decided against it. The death of his son was too recent, and the grief was too great to spend time on a campaign. Biden announced his candidacy for president in April of 2019. At 77, he was among the oldest presidential candidates ever. His age became an issue of debate during the campaign. But his main competitor, President Donald Trump, was just 3 years younger. Joe Biden called the presidential race a battle for the soul of America. He won that battle when Americans went to voting stations on November 3, 2020. U.S. election officials announced later that week that Joe Biden and his vice presidential running mate, Kamala Harris, had defeated President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. Biden received 81 million votes in all, more than any other American presidential candidate in history. Trump won about 74 million. However, Trump rejected the official vote count as incorrect and dishonest, calling the election stolen. Many of Trump's supporters took the same position, causing severe division in the country. On January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden was sworn in as President of the United States. In a speech that followed, he called on the American people to seek unity with one another. He described unity as one of the most elusive qualities in a democracy. I'm Katie Weaver.
And that's the Learning English podcast for today. Thank you, Katie, for that report. And thanks to our VOA colleagues for their work on today's program.
Most importantly, thank you for listening. For more, visit our website at learningenglish.voanews.com. I'm Katie Weaver.
And I'm Dan Friedel.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, you will hear stories from Dan Friedel and Dorothy Gundy. Later, Brian Lynn presents this week's science report. Finally, Jill Robbins and Andrew Smith bring us today's lesson of the day. But first, here is Dan Friedel.
Vietnamese electric vehicle company Vinfast recently announced its plans to build a $2 billion production center in southern India. The new factory is expected to produce up to 150,000 cars per year once it is completed. The project will include an opening investment of $500 million. Construction will start this year. The production centers are expected to support over 3,000 jobs in the Tamil Nadu state. The center will be close to the port city of Thoothukudi. Vinfast started in 2017 and has been producing electric vehicles since 2021. It already announced plans for a factory in the southern U.S. state of North Carolina. The factory there will cost $4 billion to complete, and vehicle production is expected to begin this year. Vinfast brought its cars to market in the U.S. for the first time in 2023. The cars have not sold well in the U.S. because they have received some bad reviews, and there are questions about their quality. Vinfast officials, however, believe the company can succeed in the U.S. The company's stock is listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, and for a short time, its shares were worth more than Ford and General Motors. However, by the end of 2023, the company had lost more than $1.4 billion. Vinfast said it hopes to sell its cars in 50 markets by the end of 2024. It announced a $400 million factory in Indonesia late last year. Vinfast cars will be used in Laos by Green SM, a taxi company mostly owned by Vinfast's founder. The production center is the first move by Vinfast to enter the growing Indian market. The country has one of the fastest growing electric vehicle markets in the world. India has launched a $1.3 billion plan to support electric vehicle manufacturing and use. However, of the 2.3 million EVs in use in India, most are inexpensive motorbikes, rickshaws, and scooters. Some experts wonder if there are enough Indians who have the money to purchase a costly electric car. Vinfast is part of Vingroup, which was started as an instant noodle company in Ukraine in the 1990s by Pham Nhat Vuong, who is now Vietnam's richest man. I'm Dan Friedel.
On Monday, Americans celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. In this next report, Dorothy Gundy tells us a bit about the life and work of the civil rights activist.
Martin Luther King Jr. was an American leader of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. King is remembered for his non-violent protests against the unequal treatment of African Americans. His actions led to equal rights laws for all people. In addition to being an activist, King was a scholar and religious leader, a pastor in the Christian Baptist Church. One of the most famous events related to him came in 1963. That year, more than 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington. King spoke to them on the steps of President Abraham Lincoln's memorial. He delivered a historic address known as the I Have a Dream speech. One of the most famous lines from the speech reads, "I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers." King's actions helped pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The law ended the legal separation of people by race in public places. The act also banned job discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. King and other activists watched the president sign the law. The Civil Rights Act was important, but it did not address all kinds of racial discrimination. For example, Black Americans still did not have the same voting rights as white Americans, especially in southern states. So, in March of 1965, a group of activists in Alabama marched in protest of unequal voting practices. State police attacked the protesters. Some wanted to answer with violence, but King urged peaceful action instead. The events in Alabama pushed Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act. It was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson in August of 1965. In the following years, King worked for economic equality. In April 1968, he was attending a workers' strike in Tennessee. While he was standing outside his hotel room, a sniper shot him in the face. King soon died of his wounds. The shooter was identified as a criminal who had escaped from jail. James Earl Ray was a white man who said he hated King. Ray was found guilty and sent to prison. King is remembered for many things, including his focus on nonviolent action to achieve social and political change. In 1986, the U.S. government observed the first Martin Luther King Day. Many Americans have the day off school and work. They are urged to use the time to volunteer in their communities. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and achievements are also honored at a memorial. It was dedicated in Washington, D.C. in 2011. I'm Dorothy Gundy.
American Space Agency, NASA, has postponed 2 moon missions that are facing development and safety issues. NASA's program to return astronauts to the moon for the first time since NASA's Apollo 17 mission in 1972 is called Artemis. The agency split the program into 3 parts. In 2022, Artemis 1 sent NASA's Orion spacecraft on a trip around the moon without a crew. The agency's huge Space Launch System, SLS rocket, carried Orion into space. The spacecraft traveled more than 400,000 kilometers from Earth and completed a close flyby of the moon. NASA officials declared Artemis 1 a big success. The second planned trip, Artemis 2, was set for late 2024. The goal was to send Orion on the same path Artemis 1 took, but with 4 astronauts. NASA announced last week it had set a new September 2025 target for the launch of Artemis 2. The third mission, Artemis 3, will attempt to land astronauts on the surface of the moon. NASA says the crew is expected to include the first woman and the first person of color. Artemis 3 was planned for 2025, but has now been pushed back to September 2026. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said the postponements were necessary in order to give the agency time to deal with several ongoing problems affecting the Artemis program. Safety is our top priority, Nelson said. He added that the delays will give Artemis teams more time to work through the challenges. NASA's announcement about the delays came shortly after the successful launch of a private American company's spacecraft that aimed to land on the lunar surface. That spacecraft, called Peregrine, is a moonlander built by Pennsylvania-based Astrobotic Technology. It launched January 8th aboard a Vulcan Centaur rocket built by America's United Launch Alliance, ULA. Immediately after Peregrine's launch, Astrobotic officials praised the mission as the first step to becoming the first private space vehicle to land on the moon. But shortly after the launch, a fuel leak was discovered. Astrobotic has said the spacecraft would continue on its mission while leaking fuel, but faces ongoing power and propulsion problems. The company aims to keep the lander going as long as possible and to collect data from its instruments. But officials from Astrobotic have said Peregrine is no longer expected to land on the moon. Peregrine is part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, CLPS, program. It aims to hand over the nation's major missions to private companies in an effort to operate at reduced costs. Peregrine and other planned missions in the CLPS program aim to land on the moon to support future Artemis activities. Another program member, Texas-based Intuitive Machines, plans to launch its Nova-C lander to the moon next month. Astrobotic has said it also plans to send another lander called Griffin to the moon's south pole in late 2024. It will be carrying an exploring robot or rover called Viper. Viper is designed to search for water sources on the moon. NASA's moon landing effort has been delayed repeatedly over the past 10 years, adding billions of dollars to the cost, the Associated Press reports. Government estimates have predicted total program costs will reach $93 billion through 2025. Reuters news agency reported NASA discovered problems with the Orion spacecraft's batteries during vibration tests. Engineers have said the batteries will likely need to be replaced. Catherine Kerner is a leader at NASA's Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate in Washington. She said in a statement all technical issues will be fully investigated with safety as NASA's top goal. We are letting the hardware talk to us so that crew safety drives our decision-making. Kerner added, we will use the Artemis II flight test and each flight that follows to reduce risk for future moon missions. Even with the delays and ongoing concerns, she said NASA is closer than ever to establishing sustained exploration of Earth's nearest neighbor under Artemis. I'm Brian Lynn.
Brian Lynn is here now to talk more about his science report. Thanks for joining me today, Brian.
Of course, Ashley. Glad to be here.
In this week's report, you described some changes to NASA's moon mission plans. Would you say these announced changes, which relate to the timing of planned flights, came as a surprise?
Well, on the one hand, I would say it was kind of a surprise, just because only weeks ago NASA was talking about looking forward to another test flight this year of its Orion spacecraft. And this time, the flight was to include astronauts also riding aboard Orion on a distant trip around the moon, which the agency seemed very excited about. But these Artemis missions have already faced delays, and NASA says these are necessary to resolve remaining issues to ensure safe and successful flights.
Has NASA identified specific issues that led them to announce the latest mission postponements?
The agency did say it identified some specific problems related to the operation of the Orion spacecraft. These include a battery issue, as well as difficulties with electronic elements that control airflow and temperature. So these aren't seen as major problems, but again, NASA officials are saying they just need more time to examine the difficulties and carry out more testing. And the earlier timelines set for the moon missions would simply not give engineers enough time to deal with these issues.
Okay, thanks again for joining me, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashley.
Welcome to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. My name is Andrew Smith.
And my name is Jill Robbins. Thanks for joining us. Today's lesson will help you learn more about the English you hear in our video series, Let's Learn English. The series shows Ana Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C. Here's Ana introducing herself.
Hello, my name is Ana Mateo.
Today, we're going to look at Lesson 9 from Level 2 of the series. Anna and her friend Ashley talk about their pets, and they talk about things they could have or should have done.
Pets are animals that live with families, such as dogs or cats.
Ashley's pet is a dog named Dublin. But Anna's pet is, well, it's very unusual.
That's because Anna's pet is a rock.
It's true. Anna has a pet rock. Of course, this is a kind of joke. Anna makes her rock look like it has eyes and hair. And her rock wins a contest for one-of-a-kind pets. One-of-a-kind means unique, which means there are no others the same as it.
We spell unique, U-N-I-Q-U-E.
Now, let's listen to Anna tell Ashley how she won a contest with her pet rock.
And our lesson will focus on the phrases should have and could have. Listen for these phrases, and we will explain more after you listen.
But, Anna, tell me, how did you win a pet contest without a pet?
Okay, the closest thing I have is my pet rock. I know it's silly, but I've had it since I was a little girl. So, for a joke, I brought it to the fair. But then I was invited to enter the one-of-a-kind pet contest. And I won!
Anna, only you could have won a pet contest with a pet rock. I should have brought Dublin. He would have won a contest.
It's not very easy to win one of these. Does he have a costume? They had a costume contest. You should have seen this little girl. She and her dog wore matching princess costumes.
Dublin doesn't wear costumes.
Does he know any tricks?
Come this way. Now, watch this. One more.
You caught it, Dublin!
Yay.
And you killed it! Oh, good dog! Ashley, he could have won the best catch contest. Oh, good boy. Ashley, pets are fun, aren't they?
Yes, and they become part of your family.
Did you hear the examples with should have, could have, or would have? We can say should to give advice, as in this example.
You should try to speak English.
And we say should have plus the past participle of the verb. When we talk about actions in the past we wish had been different. Ashley said,
I should have brought Dublin. He would have won a contest.
Ashley didn't bring Dublin to the contest, but she wishes she had brought him.
When we talk about the past but wish it had been different, or think about the past in a way that is different than what really happened, we say should have, or could have, or would have before the past participle of the verb.
But native speakers usually shorten these with contractions, so it sounds like this: should've, could've, would've.
And sometimes native speakers reduce or shorten the pronunciation even more. So it sounds like this: shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Oh, I wish my past had been different. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have gone. I would have won. I could have seen my friends.
When you hear someone say shoulda, woulda, coulda, it's often because the person is saying it's not good to look back with regrets.
I know, but sometimes I wish I could have done something different.
Well, we all probably wish we could have done something different in the past. But now let's talk a little bit about owning a pet. After playing with Ashley's dog, Anna thinks she wants to own one.
Ashley, I think I want a dog. No, I know I want a dog.
It's a big responsibility. You may want to spend time with a dog first.
Responsibility is a noun. The plural of this noun is responsibilities, and the word responsible is the adjective.
And responsibly is the adverb.
We often use the preposition for after the adjective responsible. Jill, what are some of the things you are responsible for at your home?
Well, I shop for the food, and I cook quite a lot, and I also feed the dog and take the dog for walks and give the dog baths. That's a lot of responsibility, isn't it?
Well, it sounds like you do have a lot of responsibilities or things you are responsible for. And as Ashley says, owning a pet can be a big responsibility.
When you own something, that means it is yours. It belongs to you.
The state of owning something is called ownership. Jill, you have a dog. What responsibilities come with pet ownership?
And I'd like to say that I think my dog thinks she owns me. Well, first there are the basics. You have to make sure your pet has enough food and water and stays healthy. Sometimes you need to take your pet to the veterinarian, which means an animal doctor. And you have to protect your pet from danger, such as other animals or getting hit by a car. And then, especially for pets like dogs and cats, you should be nice to them and try to make them happy by petting them and speaking to them in a nice voice.
I've heard you speaking in a very sweet way to your dog, Jill. And I noticed you used the verb pet. So that means we pet our pets.
That's right. To pet means to gently touch and move your hand over an animal's hair or fur. Most dogs love to be petted. But you have to be careful because not all pets like to be petted. There are some dogs and cats that don't like to be touched or that only want their owner to touch them.
We can say that those animals are very touchy. If someone or some animal is touchy, that means they are very sensitive and can become upset or angry very easily.
My dog was like that when we first got her. That's because she was a rescue, a dog who had other owners who didn't want her or could no longer keep her.
Yes, we talk about animals being rescued when someone new takes them into their home. It takes some time for the animals to adjust to the new home. So don't touch a touchy pet, but please pet the pets that want to be touched.
Isn't English fun? We hope our lesson of the day has been fun for you. And we invite you to write to us about any pets that your family and friends have. And do your pets like to be petted? I used to have a turtle. I don't think it really cared if I petted it.
Probably not. You can email us at learningenglish@voanews.com.
And remember that you can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Jill Robbins.
And I'm Andrew Smith.
And that's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm